Welcome to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast, addressing all aspects of the digital enterprise, inspiring connection without boundaries and creation without limits. Thank you for tuning in. Here are your hosts, Thom Singer and Craig Brown.
This is the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Welcome to our little show that we designed to be a resource for those who work in and around PLM. My name is Thom Singer, and I co-host this show with Craig Brown. Craig is an industry veteran and former PLM leader at General Motors, and usually he's here with me for this podcast. But once a month, I host a show where we talk about career development, where I bring in an expert and we talk about tips and tricks and things that you can think about that will challenge you to be able to go out and grow your career. Now today, I'm going to do something entirely different that I've never done in the 3-year history of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. And that is, I'm coming to you solo. Because today, we're going to talk about how do you build your personal brand and your network. And why does this even matter? Because as we return to the office in face-to-face environments, and as we start going to conferences again, this is something that's very important. A lot of people are out of practice with connecting with people. A lot of people aren't thinking about why do these relationships matter. So today's show, we're going to give you some really good ideas about how you interact with people, why you interact with people, and how if you do it well, you're going to be able to set yourself up for promotions, for new jobs, and just to be able to have more fun and be more successful in your career. Now, some of you may know that my main job, I work as a professional speaker and trainer where I talk to corporate audiences about how to build stronger inner circles and how to create relationships that go far beyond the likes, links, shares, and follows of our digital social media world. Now, I'm a big fan of all the digital tools that we use to network and connect with people, but I really believe that when we get back to basics, when we really connect with others, we're going to find more success. And as you return, either full-time or part-time, to an in-person environment in the office, and as you get back to attending conferences, this is something that can help everybody find more success. Because what I want you to do is realize that there's a lot of people out there that you're going to interact with, but those few special ones who you create uncommon connections with, those are going to be the ones who help you succeed and you help them find more success along the way. So why does this even matter? You're thinking, what? Why are we taking a whole episode to talk about people? Well, first of all, people do business with those they know, they like, and they trust. Now you might be thinking, yeah, Thom, I've heard that before. People do business with people they know, like, and trust. That's a cliche. Well, first of all cliches are based in truth. But the reality is that think about how you do business, either at work or in your personal life. Who do you choose to work with? Who do you give opportunities to? It's those people who you know, like, and trust. So getting known, building a relationship where you like them and they like you, and then having that mutual trust, it sets the foundation for you to be able to go out and do many more things and be more successful. Another reason why this matters is knowing a lot of people makes it much easier to answer the tough questions because you have complicated jobs. And when you have a complicated job, sometimes something is going to hit your plate. You're going to have to solve a problem that you really have never dealt with before. But when you have a great network, all you have to do is make a couple of calls to people who have worked on this type of issue before. People love to help their friends. If people know you, like you, and trust you, they want to see you succeed. So within a couple of phone calls, you're able to solve those tough questions. And then another reason is when you're well connected and you do well at having relationships inside the company and inside your industry, it strengthens your visibility, but also the visibility of your organization. Now, you might understand why you want to have that visibility because that leads to promotions. It leads to other companies recruiting you away. But you might say, why do I care about the visibility of my company or my department? Well, it makes it easier when it's time to recruit. Because if your company's expanding and you need to recruit people in, you personally want to work with good people. You don't want jerks in your department. So if you're well known, you know who you should go hire. And if you already know the person, you know they're not a jerk. And let's face it, nobody wants to add hard to deal with people into their department. So when you're well connected, you know who to go recruit And the person knows this is a great place to go because you've shared with them what a great environment you work in. So this helps your career. That's why this all matters. So sometimes when people talk to business professionals about building their network and building their career, they talk about crafting an elevator pitch so that when you go to one of these industry conferences, like something that might be hosted by the Digital Enterprise Society. You know, the Digital Enterprise Society is looking at doing some face-to-face meetings in 2022 and 2023, and all of you listening should make sure that you get to attend these events. But when you get there, you think, oh no, maybe I'm a little bit shy. Maybe I'm a bit of an introvert. Why in the world would I do this? How do I do this? And a lot of people teach to create an elevator pitch. And I will tell you, there is a time and a place where you have to know how to clearly and concisely tell people who you are and what you do so well. But I think the elevator pitch has really harmed the way people connect. Now, for some of you who may not know what the concept of the elevator pitch is, let me quickly explain it. This is taught in businesses all over the world, but especially in North America. We talk a lot about when you go to a conference, you should have your elevator pitch, because the idea is if you meet somebody who you could do business with or who you should be able to connect with for positive reasons for you and your organization, you need to know what to say. So you pre-rehearse a couple of sentences. And then as soon as you meet them, you tell them your elevator pitch, hoping they're going to be drawn in and find you fascinating. The problem with this is, let's imagine for a second that you and I get onto an elevator together. And I find out that you're the person in your company who is choosing speakers for your big company event. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a speaker. We're on the elevator. The idea of an elevator pitch is that by the time we go from the 30th floor to the lobby, I could tell you all about myself and get you interested in doing business with me. But imagine we get on that elevator and I realize you're looking for someone to come talk to your department. And I look at you and go, hi, my name is Thom Singer. I'm a professional speaker. I've written 12 books on human connection, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over you. What would you do when we get to the lobby and the doors open? You would run. Number one answer when I ask that question, people scream out, run. Nobody has ever said to me, oh my gosh, I would take you to the Starbucks in the lobby, buy you a cup of coffee so I could learn more. No, when we talk about ourselves a lot, when we first meet somebody, we repel them. They've actually done studies where they've looked at when people meet for the first time, and you've probably seen this in like reality TV, they send people on a blind date. You know what I'm talking about, right? They set them up, they put them there, they put a camera in the flowers, they float microphones in the beer or whatever, and they record everything. Then afterwards, they interview them separately. The people who talk the most say, oh my gosh, yes, I like them. I hope we get married and have 3 kids. The people who talk the least say, yeah, I'm not so sure I want to see them again. So when you first meet somebody, you shouldn't be talking about yourself, because when you first meet somebody, they don't really care that much about you. They care about themselves. So what you want to do is you want to start by asking a lot of questions. Be curious about people. Get them to share who they are and what they do and why they love working for their company. The more you get them to talk to you, the more 2 things are going to happen. Number one, the more they're going to like you, because when people are doing the talking, they tend to like the person who's doing the listening. But the second thing is you're going to learn things about them that will allow you to follow up with them. Because meeting someone once does not make them part of your network. I know we've kind of gotten into this thing where we meet somebody once and we instantly connect with them on LinkedIn, and then somehow we think, oh yeah, they're part of my network. But the reality is they're not. Meeting someone once does not make them part of your network. Meeting someone once makes them someone you have met once. And there is a huge difference between someone you've met once and someone who you have created a long-term and mutually beneficial network with. So you want to be thinking about, what do I do when I meet people? Am I curious about them? Am I asking questions? Because when you do this, you will stand out from everyone else they meet. And that's really one of the things you want to do. If you want to build uncommon connections, you have to stand out from the crowd. Now, when I talk about this concept of uncommon connections, people often say, Tom, I don't understand. What is an uncommon connection? Well, an uncommon connection is those few people who you're connected to. Because as I said in the introduction to this episode, you could have 10,000 people on LinkedIn, but if they really don't know who you are, they never think about you, they don't know how you're learning and growing along the way, they don't really notice when you've changed jobs, there can't be a mutually beneficial relationship. Because here's the thing. People ask me all the time, they think networking is one thing. A lot of people say, oh, Thom, I hate networking. And I'm like, how can you hate networking? It's the foundation of the most successful people in business. It's because of the relationships that they have. And people say, oh, I hate going to those events. I hate the cheap wine. I hate the stale cheese. Networking is not bad wine and stale cheese. Nowhere in the definition does it have to do with the food that is served at a networking event. Networking is the creation of long-term and mutually beneficial relationships between two or more people where everyone involved in that relationship finds more success because of it than they would have without it. I want you to think about that for a minute. Networking is the creation of long-term and keyword mutually beneficial relationships where everyone involved finds more success because of the relationship than they would without it. Therefore, you can't have an uncommon connection with everybody. By pure definition, uncommon connections have to be uncommon. So you can know a lot of people. You can have a lot of connections on LinkedIn. You can have the directory of your whole company so that you have everybody's phone number and email. But you can only have a few people that you really understand who they are and they really understand who you are, and you have each other's backs. So you want to cultivate those relationships because that's where the power comes from. Because when you have those relationships, those people talk you up. And when people talk you up, that's how you move forward. So from an internal perspective in the company, and as we talk about going back to work, and a lot of you aren't going back at all. A lot of you will be remote work forever, and that's awesome if that's what you choose. Some of you will be brought back to the office 5 days a week. Others will have a hybrid method. However, no matter how you're working, you want to develop friendships with the people in your company, in your department, and in other departments. They've actually done studies. Gallup has been studying this for years, that when somebody has a best friend at work, they stay longer, they're more productive, and they're happier in their job. Now, I want you to think about this. If you manage people, do your employees have friends inside the company? Because if they do, they'll stay longer, they'll be more productive, and they'll be happier at work. Isn't that what you want from the people who you manage? So make sure you're looking at ways of how do people socialize? Which leads me to why. Why would they do this and how do they do it? Well, first of all, shared experiences build relationships. So the why you want to have internal events with your department, maybe you do an offsite, maybe you get everybody together for a special meeting. It's a shared experience. And then maybe there's a dinner afterwards where you can all go out, just have a little bit of fun. Shared experiences are how we build relationships. And that's true inside the company. And it's true when you go to industry conferences. Because when you attend these types of industry conferences, that's a shared experience. You're listening to a great keynote speaker. You're going to a workshop. There's a happy hour. Maybe there's some sort of an off-site fun event. These are how relationships are built. Think about it in your own life. Look back to when you were in college. Who are the people you keep in close touch with today? Are these people who you had in like that freshman 101 psych class? You know the class. It had like 4,000 people in the arena. And you barely ever saw the teacher. You didn't know who was in the class. Somebody who you saw in that class once in a while, who throughout your next 4 years you waved at when you crossed the quad, like, hey, dude. Or are your friendships of who you keep in touch with today people who you lived in the dorms with? People who you were in a fraternity or a sorority or some sort of other social club with? Is it people you went to sporting events with? Is it people who you spent spring break with? Is it people who you did study groups with so that you could advance and excel? That's how you built relationships in college that are with you 5 years, 10 years, in some cases 30 and 40 years later. Well, the same thing is true in business. When we share experiences, that's how we connect with people. That's why you want to do this. Now, sometimes people tell me, yeah, but these experiences in business, I'm a little bit more shy. That's awesome. The introvert-extrovert spectrum, it's split about 50-50, and it is a spectrum. Some people are more introverted. Some people are more extroverted. Most of us are somewhere in the middle. However, that's the interesting thing that you want to pay attention to is know who you are as a person. Now, I think our society has done a disservice because I think our society has championed the extrovert over the past, I don't know how many years, 100 years maybe. And they've championed the extrovert when in reality, those of you who are more introverted, you're actually going to be better at networking. Now, when I say that, when I'm inside a company or at a conference, there's always someone who goes, what? And they make a face like, I don't know what you speak of, Thom. What do you mean introverts are better networkers? Well, introverts do not like to talk about themselves. So naturally, they're going to ask more questions and listen more. And if you think about what I said before, that's going to draw people to you. Plus, when you listen more, you pick up nuggets of things that other people need. And when you can serve others, that's going to help you build your brand and reputation, because people want to be around, just in general, people who serve the community they're part of. They want to be around people who help other people. Think about this for a minute, right? There are a lot of takers out there who are like, what's in it for me? Hey, give me this, give me that, make that introduction for me, help me, me. The givers in the world are getting tired of all the takers. So when you're a giver who helps and serves others, people are drawn to you because that's who they want to be around. Now, you might be saying, Thom, this is great. This is fun. You got a lot of enthusiasm for a solo episode of the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. But here's the thing, Thom. I'm really busy. My job is hard. I've got a lot of responsibility. I have a family. I have other responsibilities. There's too many things going on. And on top of that, there are so many distractions in the world we live in, right? We all have our smartphones with us, and every time they beep, we look over at the smartphone. Every single thing we do, we are caused by distractions. They're like, how do I have time to focus on relationships, to focus on cultivating my network and building a personal brand when my phone just beeped and now I've got to go check Facebook? Well, I will tell you what, there have always been distractions. So my dad, was born in 1914. Now, before I go on, you're doing the math. You're thinking, wait a minute, Thom. Your dad was born in 1914. That would make him 108 years old. He passed away at 99 years old. He's been gone for 9 years. But a lot of you are thinking, wait a second, how old are you? Well, here's the thing. My dad was 52 years old when I was born. And I'll just tell you a little secret just because, no one's listening, right? It's just us. My dad would tell you, if he was alive today and I brought him here onto this podcast, he would tell all of you that I was a surprise. He used to tell people that, oh, he's my surprise. And then he'd say, you know what a surprise is? That's an accident that worked out really well because we like him. But the truth is, with my father, he was a great guy, but he was born in 1914 and he lived this amazing life until 2013, which is when he passed away at 99 years old. But here's the thing. Imagine having lived in that 100-year span. My dad was born 11 years after the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. Think about that for a minute. 11 years after Kitty Hawk, and by the time he passed away, there were space shuttles and men had walked on the moon, all of this communication, everything was amazing. The change in the world in one lifetime was amazing. So I asked my dad, I said, Dad, how have people changed over the last 100 years? And he said to me, people haven't changed at all. And I said, well, that's not true. Of course people have changed. There's entire people who are training companies on how to deal with the different generations. We've got, the millennials, and we've got now we've got the Generation Z, Gen Zs. People have changed drastically. And my dad said, no, people at their core have not changed. Humanity has not changed that much. And I argued with him. I said, no, there's an entire industry about educating about the generations. They have changed so much. And my dad said, just go read the Bible. Now, my dad was not a super religious person. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, if you open it up, here's a book that's 2,000 years old. And if you read any story, you're going to find stories about lust and greed. You're going to find stories about war and famine. You're going to find stories about business dealings that went well and businesses that didn't do well. You're going to find stories about leaders of governments who were beloved by their people. And you're going to find stories of leaders of governments who were awful. He said, does that sound familiar? It's just what you would hear on any news station that you read or that you listen to today. And he's right. And I said, well, what has changed? And he said, we have more distractions because of our cell phones. And he told me a story. He said that he lived in a retirement village. He said people used to come to visit him. When they'd walk in the door, he'd look at the clock. And he'd wait to see how long it was till they'd look at their cell phone to see if they had a text. And he said the average person, and they came to, he goes, these are like you, me. He goes, that's you, your brothers, my grandchildren, my nephews and nieces, neighbors, things like that. He said, people were coming to see me. He goes, heck, I'm in my late 90s. They're coming to see me because they know I won't be around much longer. And the longest they could go was about 5 minutes. He goes, the average person had their phone out like 3 or 4 minutes into being in his apartment just to check if something had happened. And he said, so people haven't changed, but the access to distractions has changed because we carry it around in our hands. So when you're at an event and when you're with people, put your phones away. One of the things I do when I work with companies who want to have more effective meetings is I tell them, have an agenda, have a set amount of time, never run long, and nobody can have their cell phone out. And I'll tell you what, if you're in a company and you have human interaction in a conference room and everybody has to put their phone away, but you promise them the meeting's only going to be 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour, whatever it is, stick to it, but nobody can look at their phones, everybody will be engaged. You'll have a more successful meeting. So don't fall prey to the fact that the distraction machine is in our pocket. Plus, there has now been studies done by universities that say that if you have a cell phone in your hand or on your person that you know you could look at any minute, it's harder to connect with the person who you are there face to face with. So this is a serious issue. Now, as you meet people, what you want to do is you want to uncover shared commonalities, because all of us have little things that we might have in common with somebody. So if you ask a lot of questions, you start finding things that you have in common with other people. And that becomes really key to your core. So ask a lot of questions and then look for what you have in common. There's all kinds of things that you can have in common. But if it's, hey, if you're at a PLM conference and what do? Oh, I work in PLM. That is not a random commonality. Everybody at that conference has that. But if you find out that somebody went to San Diego State University, hey, wow, that may not be the most popular university that people in PLM went to. I picked that university because I went to San Diego State University. So if you're listening to this and you went to San Diego State, go Aztecs. We have an uncommon commonality that we have in common that we share that not everybody listening has. So email me and tell me. That would be really cool. And then we can have a conversation. And guess what? When you have a connection like that, the relationship moves fast forward. Because when we find things we have in common with people that we don't have in common with everybody, it makes it much easier to connect with them. And continue to ask questions throughout the course of a relationship as you're building that connection with people. Because curiosity does two things. Number one, I've already said, the more curious about them that you are, the more they're going to like you. But the second thing is the more curious you are, the more you're going to learn from other people. None of us have all the answers. The power of having a network is that the people we're with, their brilliance translates over to us because success leaves clues. So when you're around people who've been successful and you ask a lot of questions, they're going to give you an idea here, a theory there, a nugget of information, and you're going to be able to say, wow, I can take that back and put that into my work. So you want to think this through because success leaves clues. So as we get back to more face-to-face activities, as you're coming back into the office, as you're attending live conferences, I want you to think, I'm not overwhelmed by all of the people. I'm going to focus on the few people who I'm with at this moment. You want to be present with the people you're talking to. You want to put your phone away. You want to ask them a lot of questions, and you want to be there in the moment. Now, not everybody you meet are you going to have a love connection with. Not everybody's going to become that uncommon connection, even if you want them to be. Even if you try to cultivate that relationship, it's not going to happen. However, you don't need that many of them. I don't think you can have more than about a dozen uncommon connections. So choose wisely, cultivate relationships, and realize that all opportunities in life can come from people. So the people who you meet and the people who you encounter, they can open up entire new doors to things you've never even dreamed of. But here's the thing I want to end with. This is not just about business, right? Connecting with people isn't just so you can find a promotion or so that your company can recruit the next great person. Connecting with people hits all areas of your life. And I know this firsthand because when my youngest daughter was born, she was born with a medical condition where the bones in her skull were fused together. Now, the problem was they didn't diagnose it right and they didn't notice it. And as she was growing, and those of you who have children, they're always measuring their heads. Her head was not shaped correctly. And we kept asking about it. And the doctor kept telling us heads are funny. They're shaped a little bit different. But finally, when she was 5 months old, he agreed that we probably should do a CAT scan to make sure there wasn't any fusion in the bones in the skull. Because when you're born, Your skull is 5 free-floating plates, and when you're a teenager, they sort of fuse together into one. However, there is a condition where the bones can fuse early, and it causes like an elephant man-like deformity. And this is what was happening to my daughter, Kate. Her head wasn't growing right. And so finally they did the CAT scan, and the doctor had told us, this is pretty rare. It usually happens to boys. I don't think this is what's going on. Well, Kate likes to buck the odds. No matter what it is, she'll always get ahead of it, for good or bad. And it came back positive. Kate had this condition. It was called sagittal synostosis. And we were given 2 choices. We could do nothing, raise a kid with a socially limiting handicap, maybe some brain damage from pressure in the skull, or we could do surgery before she turned 6 months old. Now, we weren't diagnosed till she was 5 months old, so we had to go into overdrive during this. And this is where my network of people came in handy. We did not have, in the city I lived in at the time, we do now, we didn't have a first-class children's hospital and the state-of-the-art doctors. So we had to look beyond our community. And I had a really high-profile job, so my wife was flying every couple of days to a different city to bring Kate to see a doctor. And most people who I knew in my network, when they heard about it, they couldn't even talk to me. You know, when people are going through a rough time, often people don't know what to say, so they don't say anything. But there were other people who came up to me at business events and inside my company, and they gave me hugs. They said things like, our church group prays for Kate every day. I remember this one guy pulled me aside at a networking event. He said, Thom, I heard about your daughter. I'm really sorry you're going through this. I don't know why your family has to deal with this, but I want you to know, he said, I want you to know that I'm an atheist. I don't believe in a higher power. He said, but I care. And he gave me a really big hug. That was awesome. And then he added, he said, and I live in your neighborhood. And every day when I run by your house early in the morning, I send good vibes towards that baby. It was so funny. I'd look out the window in the morning and expect to see somebody skipping by the house, sending good vibes right at the building. But here's what happened. One person in my network called me one night at 1:30 in the morning. And I answered the phone. I'm like, hello? And he said, Thom. And he identified himself. And I'm like, yeah? And he goes, I just got off the phone with my first cousin. And I'm like, so? And he goes, my first cousin is one of the top 3 pediatric neurosurgeons in the world. And I said, who is he? And he told me, and he happened to be a doctor who was world renowned, but you couldn't get in to see him because he was so busy. And we were diagnosed late. We had to do the surgery within the month. And he said, he goes, I called him because I wanted you to be able to talk to him to make sure you had all the right answers. But he wants to talk to you because he wants to see Kate. The next day, I called this gentleman, one of the top pediatric neurosurgeons in the world, lived across the country from where I lived. We got on the phone. We talked for an hour. And during that time, he said, can your wife or you get here with Kate this week? He goes, I want to see her. I have a new way of doing this surgery that's less invasive, less bleeding, less swelling, better on the baby. And I'd read about this surgery. This is a doctor I'd wanted to get in to see, but you couldn't. The next day, my wife flew from Texas, where I lived, to San Diego. And she called me that night and said, he wants to do the surgery on Friday. He's the first doctor who showed any urgency. Now, I want you to remember, a couple of days earlier, we couldn't get in to see this doctor, but someone in my network, it was their first cousin. This wasn't about business, but this was about the most important thing we'd ever faced in our life. The next day, I flew to San Diego. That Friday at 7:30 in the morning, we handed Kate over to the doctors at Rady Children's Hospital. And 3 hours later, they called my cell phone and they said the words I'll never forget. They said, Kate is going to be fabulous. Now, I tell you this story not because you're ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon. At least I hope not. I tell you this story because in your life, in your community, in your company, in your faith community, you're going to need something. And someone out there who you cross paths with in the course of your daily interaction with humanity, someone out there, their first cousin, might hold the answer to the problem that you face. Now, that was 20 years ago. Kate is now 20 years old. She's a sophomore at Dartmouth College. She is fantastic. She's beautiful. She's smart. She is looking to change the world. She's an environmental biology major. She is out there to do really cool things. Now, I'm sure we could have found a great doctor who would have had similar results, but it's because someone in my network, their first cousin, held the answer to what we needed. We were able to fast forward and get that done. So I tell you this because if you invest in people, it will impact every single area of your life. But you can't just do it today because you listen to a podcast. You've got to be committed to make sure that you're investing in people always. It can take 3 to 5 years to build the type of network that I'm talking about. This is a marathon, not a sprint. This is a lifestyle. Networking is not a verb. You don't go networking. It is a lifestyle choice. You have to invest in the people around you. But what will happen if you do this? You will build those uncommon connections. People will share information with you, opportunities with you. You will help them in return, and everybody will benefit from the fact that you have a stronger inner circle. Hey, thank you so much for listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. I absolutely love hosting this show, and Craig and I love hearing from those of you who are listening. If you have a topic or a guest you'd like to hear from, please reach out to us. Go to digitalenterprisesociety.org and check it out, because every week we want to be here to bring you more thoughts and ideas to help you with your career in product lifecycle management. And remember, the Digital Enterprise Society is a place for the exchange of ideas around digital manufacturing tools. Go visit their website today at digitalenterprisesociety.org.
You've been listening to the Digital Enterprise Society podcast. Learn more about what you've heard here today at digitalenterprisesociety.org. Join us again next week for more connection without boundaries and creation without limits.